Alright, let the movie reviews continue. What's up guys, I'm Justin and today we're going to be talking about scary stories to tell in the dark. But let's just do it in the light. Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark is based off the collection of short stories of the same exact name. If you were a kid growing up in the 90s, it was all about scary stories to tell in the dark and Goosebumps. This movie adaptation takes place in 1968 in the small town of Mill Valley, Pennsylvania. Horror movies love PA, don't they? This story follows a group of 3 friends on Halloween night. Stella, who's the main character, I kind of relate to her a little bit, and she's my favorite character because she's an amateur horror writer, and I've always been doing that in my spare time, just coming up with little stories here or there, or ideas. Some might be without the constraints of budget or anything like that, so I'll never be able to make them, but regardless, it's still fun to write. Stella and her friends play a prank on this high school bully named Tommy, and of course, Tommy and his gang retaliate. In the process of running away, Stella and her group of friends get mixed up with this drifter named Ramon, who they quickly become friends with. They eventually all flee to this creepy abandoned house, and for the sake of not spoiling anything for you guys, let's just say they took something from that house that doesn't belong to them. I enjoyed the hell out of this film. The part that lured me in the most is the fact that I've never seen any of these actors or actresses in this film in anything before. Like, if you can have a great setup, a great story, and I have no clue who any of these actors are, and they do a decent enough job, then you got me. As someone who vaguely remembers the book, I mean, it's been a good like 16 or 17 years since I picked up that book, but regardless, they incorporate a story called The Red Spot into this film, and that was my favorite growing up. It's equally as horrifying visually as it was just reading it off those pages in a book years ago. Another good aspect of this film is it has that preteen horror vibe like Goosebumps or Are You Afraid of the Dark, without the corny factor. It doesn't need to rely on nudity or grotesque violence, just good old-fashioned visual horror, and practical horror for that matter. Well, for the most part practical. Talk about it later. But if you guys were a fan of Goosebumps or Are You Afraid of the Dark or any type of movie like that, Casper or The House with the Clock in Its Walls, then you'll enjoy this film. If I had to talk about some negative aspects of this film, I would say the main plot of this movie, while it's still good enough and fits in with the tone and stories from the book, is highly reminiscent of the Goosebumps movie that came out a few years ago. And when they decide to use CGI in this film, it does look a little bit jarring. It's not terrible, but it has that like cartoony, low-budget horror film type of CGI. And this movie has like a Stand By Me and It type of vibe, one of those coming-of-age stories. And I'm a sucker for movies like that. I won't spill any details, but one of the freakiest aspects of this film for me involves a scarecrow. When you guys see it, you'll be scarred. I'd actually love to have that scarecrow on like a lawn display for Halloween this year. I need to see if that exists. So since this movie is based off the first book in the series, the funny thing about the first book is there's 29 stories in that book. So as far as sequels concerned, I mean, this movie did make a decent amount of money so far. And they could still do it lower budget like they did with this. So you could have endless possibilities just from the first book. Whether they incorporate the second or third collection of short stories in the series, regardless, you still have tons of source material. I would love to see sequels for this film. The soundtrack for this movie is super creepy too. There's a specific song involving a music box that played throughout, and I caught myself humming it on the way home. Wrapping this one up, solid acting, good practical effects, and just visual horror, not too many jump scares. Somewhat cliche plot and cartoony CGI, even though it's used sparingly. And last but not least, the tone of the film, tense moments, and great soundtrack all lend to a great horror film. Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark gets an 8.5 out of 10.